Hi, this is Steve Baker. I am the Pragmatic Libertarian. I'm excited to introduce to you today my guest. This is David Ulmer. He is the Wake County Libertarian Party Chair. And I want to, I guess, why don't you, real quick, you've done this, this is your second term?
Yeah, so this is my second time, 2-year terms for local chairs of the for Wake County for Libertarian affiliate. So I've been the chair since 2017, and I've run for North Carolina House twice in 2016 and 2018. So last 4 or 5 years, fairly active as a Libertarian here in the county.
Ah, cool. I want to jump right in, David, and let's just go ahead and get this pandemic discussion out of the way here first, because I really do want to spend more time with you today talking about party issues and where you guys are headed locally, and some of the philosophical differences maybe between myself as a small L libertarian and you as a large L guy. But I do want to spend a few minutes talking about this particular thing that we're all going through, this crisis. Um, it's April 19th, Sunday right now. We're a few
hmm
weeks into our local stay-at-home social distancing orders. Give me, if you would, a quick overview of the local party's stance on Governor Cooper's shutdown executive orders.
So the local party stance has actually been quite challenging. I mean, even within the members of the Wake County Libertarian Party Executive Committee and probably what I would call the 10 most active members, there's been some disagreement, to be quite honest. I know you've written about Sweden a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a very interesting example because it's voluntary, and they're kind of toughing it out, so to speak. And I appreciate what they're doing. Others are a little bit more willing, I'll say, to kind of go along with the solution that's been implemented by now. I guess for me, one of the most interesting or probably more disappointing things is the number of libertarians that seem shocked that government failed to handle this correctly at the federal level. Um, you know, like I tell people, I mean, I at one point last year, I went to the DMV and got a real ID card done in under an hour. And that was amazing. Like, I didn't think I had blocked off the whole morning. And that's just because my mindset, I just assume it's not going to go well if I go to a
Right.
bureaucratic government organization. So the number of people who express shock and disbelief that the CDC didn't get the tests right, or other groups weren't fully prepared, or the message didn't reach the right leaders, it's kind of like, well, what did you expect? I mean, our whole party is built around expecting that certain things become too bureaucratic and large and fail in large part because of that. And yet you still have some that are just, shocked that it happened, so to speak.
Speak a little bit more about the. You said a key thing just a moment ago. The volunteerism, not necessarily that Sweden is experimenting with here through this crisis, as opposed to the most of the rest of the world. But that's pretty much an underlying theme of the party. I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah,
volunteerism shirts they wear today.
I, I can't really speak for the party just because we do seem a little out of sync as a group. But the whole point is voluntary solutions. So I think it would have been perhaps wise and prudent to have some advice, guidance, whatever you want to call it, come out and attempt a voluntary solution at least for a few weeks first. But that wasn't tried. And so it's going to be challenging moving forward in the area. I mean, remember, a lot of this was to quote, flatten the curve. I know our local hospitals here in Wake County are not under a lot of pressure.
No.
My wife's a nurse. They're under pressure in the sense that we've lost $1 billion in the state as far as our hospitals have. But some nurses are being furloughed.
Right.
I mean, that's what people don't realize is we have people in the medical establishment who's currently because they just don't have the patients there. So if you're looking at things as a local issue, state issue, at least, places like South Dakota, Wyoming, maybe shouldn't implement anything mandatory. And maybe we should switch to a voluntary model in this state if we're currently doing a decent job managing the situation.
Yeah, I just read this morning that North Carolina's hospitals are operating at about an average of 50% occupancy statewide. And as you mentioned, there's reports all over the state of furloughs happening, with the healthcare workers from top to the bottom, whether they're surgeons or janitors. They're letting people go, and it seems to me that somebody would go, why don't we perform a hip surgery or alleviate some pain in some other areas until we actually see a problem. These in and out, outpatient surgeries can happen very quickly. It's not like it's going to disrupt the entire chain to allow some of these things to be going on. And then if there's an eruption in your community, okay, then we'll
Yeah,
back
no,
off
I
and
certainly
take
understand.
care of it.
I guess so. You indicated this could be a little bit back and forth. I'll ask you: do you see anything that's happening, either nationally or state level, that's kind of a silver lining in all this? Is there something you see that's happening and developing where you're like, well, there'll be a lesson learned from this that is a good lesson?
Well, I see silver linings and I see dark clouds, and unfortunately, when it comes to my particular industry, this dark cloud is going to hover for quite a long time. I hope it doesn't become a uh, category 6 hurricane and wipe my industry out. But the silver linings are that we are looking at some reopenings happening. I think, to be honest with you, I think there's going to be enough pressure on here locally on Governor Cooper to back off and come May 1st, not extend really draconian orders throughout the entire state, and maybe leave a little bit more to the local municipalities to do what they feel are appropriate. On the other hand, I don't see any way for the restaurant industry, the event industry to survive this with the administration, talking about the Trump administration's guidelines for phasing in operations over, God knows how many weeks or months before they get. And I don't know if you've read those phase-in guidelines or not yet, but it doesn't alleviate the reality that, for instance, Business Insider just reported, and they said that as of April 1st of just this month, that already 3% of restaurants have announced permanent closure as a result of this crisis. They anticipate that 1 in 5, now there's 1 million restaurants in America. That's 200,000 restaurants that
No,
they project will go out of business permanently as a result of this. Now, that's not going to be Applebee's. It's not going to be Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. They just got $20 million from the feds. It's going to be all the local mom and pops that operate on incredibly thin margins. They're not going to be able to do that. Now, you take that and extrapolate that to the bar business. Phase 1, bars are not allowed to open. That's the administration's recommendations. Phase 2, they can begin operating with, minimal, capacity. I don't know how they're going to phase all this in with a 20%, 25, 50% capacity, the fire code capacity. I don't know what they're going to start doing and how they're going to do that. So the longer this phase in takes, particularly for the businesses that require a gathering of human beings in a compact space, the worse it's going to be for us, and the worse and increased suffering is going to happen within that particular industry. Now, I
I'm
didn't I
gonna
didn't get into the silver linings very well, did I?
no, and so I'm gonna point out some points. So I do know some small business owners in the area, especially some close by here, we'll say within 2 miles of me. Small business administration loans didn't reach them because they're true small businesses. They're not Ruth
Absolutely.
Chris. But the silver lining is, as you talk to these people, you go, you see, this is why I don't trust a big government solution. And you
Yep.
begin to I really needed them and they're not working this time. And so long term, that does plant that seed that doesn't work. And I will also point out that if government restrictions become so tight and failure, there are people, to your event industry and bars. So maybe that's true for the bar that you're thinking about. That doesn't stop two bartenders and a DJ from finding a house that doesn't have any nearby neighbors and having a house party with 30 people and hosting it
And
and
you don't
making all
don't
that money as cash under the table. When government fails this bad, the faith in it as an institution begins to really diminish, and then the respect for it diminishes. So if you're somebody who's trying to convince people that government doesn't work, this is really, the silver lining is there's a lot more people who are now like, okay, I'm going to explain to me why government doesn't work. All right, well, I'm glad I have your attention for once.
Well, people have certainly found out that it's a lot cheaper to drink at home than it is to go out. We've also learned how much better a certain cocktail tastes with a triple or a quadruple than it does with the singles they serve bar. But having said that, yeah, that's going to happen. But how's that going to? What's going to happen when Gladys Kravitz, looks across the street, peers through her blinds, and she calls the cops on that private
No,
bar?
that has been interesting. I've been privy to a few interesting conversations where it was like, well, who has the neighbors that are cool, and would, or to the point, have it's like a half-acre lot or what have you, or could park somewhere and you wouldn't realize it was that. But that's kind of the whole speakeasy thing, right? You're going into like a 1920s, how do we do this? How do we have social lives underground for those of us who are interested or maybe don't find the restrictions helpful or meaningful or what have you, as far as stopping the spread? How do we, what develops? That's the real big if. That's, well, not the big if. That's one of many ifs that'll develop. So I'm waiting to see how that plays out if this continues into May.
Well, since you bring up this particular subject about the private speakeasy, unlicensed, illicit, gatherings of people together. I'm going to make a confession right here. You're going to hear it first. That
Okay.
I actually did perform since this shutdown at an illicit event, a secret event. It was I don't want to give away too much detail, but I'll tell you, it was taking place on the very first weekend of Governor Cooper's shutdown orders. All right.
Mm-hmm.
It was a particular lady's birthday who lives up in the northeastern corner of North Carolina, and so she contacted a friend over in across the state line in Virginia, who has a large, property out in a rural area, big barn,
Yeah.
and contacted them, and she wanted to move her birthday party to their location. Now the Virginia orders were a few days behind. I think the Virginia orders came in like 3 days after this particular birthday party was scheduled. So she called in a panic because her band canceled; they weren't going to do it. And can you guys come and play my birthday party? I gave her a really big quote. I said, "Yeah, if we're going to take this risk, you're going to pay dearly." She said, "I didn't care." She said, "This is my birthday party, and I'm going to celebrate." Well, the next thing I had to do is I had to convince my band members to come do it. Well, okay, so we're talking about volunteerism right here. We're talking about using common sense. As it turns out, my drummer, not only is he a cancer survivor, but his wife has just recently gone through cancer treatments and has a suppressed, immune system at this point, or damaged immune system. And so he didn't feel that it was, in any way, shape, or form, common sense for him to come out to any type of gathering, even just hanging out with his bandmates, which was fine because we've had, over the years, I've got subs that can do that and guys that know our stuff. And so I called another friend of mine who was not in that particular circumstance, called the rest of my band members. We were able to get together. We agreed to it, and we didn't know because the Governor Cooper's orders went into effect on a Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't know if the cops were going to be blocking streets, if they were going to be pulling people over. We didn't know if they're going to be checking papers. We didn't, where are you going to? Show me your papers, that kind of thing. And so we all gathered together, we loaded up the van and the trailer, and we took off to Virginia. Of course, once we got across the state line, we were free again. We weren't looking
Yeah.
over our shoulder anymore. We had a great event, great party. To my knowledge, all my band members are still alive. So we did it. We did it, and I think that we did it the right way, and that we used our common sense, and we examined our own personal situations, our own lives, and our own susceptibilities, our own at-risk quotients, and made the decision to do the event.
Now I have an image of the Blues Brothers in the 106 miles to Chicago, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses as Steve Baker heads off to Virginia to do a show.
Dude, we were on a mission from God. It
Of
was a work
course.
day. So anyway, um, Is there anything else about this particular thing that you would like to say or talk about or drill
No,
me on?
no, not growing. I'm more curious than anything how long people can deal with the situation as far as the appointment. I mean, look, there's risk everywhere. Like I said, my wife's a nurse. If things did get bad in the hospital, she would be moved and shifted to a different group.
Yeah.
My father's in one of those assisted living facilities, so much like your friend. I mean, there's people I'm concerned about that are high risk. But I also know my stepson's unemployed right now because of this. So it's the tension's going to have to give one way or the other at some point.
You asked about silver linings, and certainly there is one glaring silver lining here. There have been so many emergency deregulations, particularly in the medical supply chain. Is it possible that we will be able to cling to those deregulations and not allow things to go back so that we can now demonstrate and show that if government releases its stranglehold on so many layers and aspects and levels of our supply chain, that everything will work better?
I would like to be an optimist with you there, but those are large corporations that need their money back. Their revenue streams have been damaged, and those regulations and the politicians that enforce them will put them right back in place when this is over.
All right. Well, see, you completely shattered my silver lining there.
There you go.
All right, so let's we did this. We covered what I call Commie Virus 2020. So let's jump to my and let's get personal right now, as it relates. Let's talk about me. All right, for a second. You know that since you and I have been introduced over the last couple of years, that I have what I call a tough love relationship with the Libertarian Party. Now, I myself am not a member of the party. I do wear the small L label,
Mhm.
and I consider the party my family, my cousins. Some of them are distant cousins, in my assessment, but nevertheless, uh, on 90% of all issues, we have the same goals in common. So
Mhm.
give me your perspective really quick on your overall impression of somebody who claims to be a pragmatic libertarian as somebody who's more of a, gung ho party member.
Uh, I mean, so in Wake County, I think we try very hard. I encourage the big L's and the little L's. I mean, let's be even more clear. The big L's are usually just flat out anarchists. They'll say, and there is a philosophical approach there, with regards to how they want to get there. So it becomes really a lot of it is the tension around messaging and communication, right? Do you take a very libertarian, very committed, hardcore view of what the world should be and go forth with that message and try to sell it? Or do you try to say, hey, look, these are issues where we actually have a broader audience, and these are issues that maybe aren't going to fall into that neat red versus blue divide? Do we try to push these issues forward? And so I think that's a lot of the tension. And then you always do have a few libertarians who are libertarian except for that issue, whatever that issue may be, and that always is unique. And I think sometimes you've run into a few of those who were libertarian except for X, and then you kind of call them out on X. And some people have thin skin and don't appreciate that approach, and others are fine with it. So
I I've had respect and admiration for the way you manage your own team. I don't know what we want to call. Is it chapter? Is it
affiliate is the appropriate
affiliate? Is
term.
the appropriate party term? Okay. Um, I have had admiration and respect for that. There have been changes in the 20 years since I first attended a Wake County party meeting and was quite frankly aghast and appalled at what I saw and didn't come back for 20 years. I started sneaking in the back door again, a couple of years ago. But things have gotten better. On the other hand, when I say gotten better, they're certainly better here locally. But on the other hand, you still have the specter of the pink lady, the naked dancer, the To be honest, the unshaven neckbeard guy who has caused you guys a lot of damage in public relations, that was the co-chair of the party for a couple of years at the
Mm.
national level, and that still comes up, and we still see it on a regular basis. Now, let me just give you a local example, and I'm picking on somebody here that I like, by the way, one of your guys I
Okay.
really, really like. So, one of your guys running for local, well, he's running for office, and he lives in a suburban area of Wake County,
Hmm.
and a mostly conservative area. And by conservative, I don't mean politically. It's just it's suburban lifestyle conservatism. And he did a campaign ad, I guess, a week or so ago on his back deck, and he was wearing a very sectarian T-shirt, and had the full tattoo sleeved arms, and
Hmm.
naked arms. And I have this saying that I have been using for years and years and years since I started TPL, and that is, there's the world we want versus the world in which we actually live. And you and I both know, and you and I both don't care what people look like. We don't care what color they are. We don't care what race they are. We don't care what religion they are. We don't care about any of those external issues, labels, uh, or visual elements whatsoever. Their attire, their dress, their hairstyles, anything. We don't care. But in application of selling the message to the audience that you want to receive it in the way you want them to receive it, which is ultimately to go vote for you, it seems to me the party still has a long way.
Well, so that's interesting in the sense. So let's look at Wake County. Wake County is deep blue through the center, Raleigh.
Yeah.
Um, it is purple in those suburbs, especially in northern and southern Wake. But it's purple trending blue.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if a candidate is in, so there's two Senate races as far as North Carolina Senate, that's NC 17, NC 18, that potentially could be close, meaning within 5%. So then the question becomes, what is the party trying to do long term? And one of the things we've done in Wake County is looking at the demographics locally, not nationally, but locally in the county. We don't gain much traction by focusing on taxes and guns. It's not that I am not a fan of raising taxes constantly, and I certainly support the Second Amendment. But as far as a broader message of what works in this county, we also have to look at who might vote for us. And so now we're looking at unaffiliated voters. We're looking at voters who don't really strongly identify as Democrat or Republican, and those are usually younger voters. So we're looking then for a group of voters who are under 40, who are unaffiliated, who maybe only show up in presidential cycles, and they're not committed to either of the major parties. So maybe somebody presenting with that look, presenting that message, maybe we're reaching that person that he wants to identify with, as opposed to somebody who's as old as I am, or somebody who's going to wear a suit or what have you. I do understand the point, but my point is if I go out and try to reach 60-year-old Republicans, um, I'm not going to, especially in what is going to be a very polarized red versus blue presidential cycle. But if at a state level down ballot, I think we have some opportunities.
Mm-hmm. I understand what you're saying, but are you also saying that it's more important right now for the party to peel off that 1 to 5% that is in that unaffiliated mix, at the risk of not, indeed, maybe even offending the larger group? Because even on the blue side, they don't want Biden, with a nose ring and tattoos on his forehead.
Well, that goes to your point. I mean, even, as we prepared for this, you talk about, why things are so hard nationally. Well, if you're thinking nationally, then, and you're going to bring up Biden, that does cause challenges. But remember that under 40 group, they're still sending their kids. I mean, they're still educating their kids, their parents.
Yeah.
That is, they are new parents. And so there are a lot of people who might normally vote for a left leaning candidate, especially at the state level, who support school choice. So one of our three core issues in the county is school choice. And the reason that maybe some of those parents, look, they're having trouble bringing themselves voting for the party of Trump, they want a message, and this is where I have to work with libertarians is, look, you know, coming out and just blasting government schools and public schools is evil probably isn't the right message. The
Right.
right message is talking about choice and opportunity for parents. So people who choose to use a charter school or, they want to use a voucher, those people have the opportunity, government at least allows them to have that choice. And so again, I think having, a younger tattooed parent who has kids that maybe take advantage of those vouchers, again, it's tough. I wish that we could just, the other parties, let's not kid ourselves, they have this trouble too. Every party wishes they could just pull perfect candidates to run. But look at the top of the tickets now for the Republicans and Democrats. Even some of the state house, some of the representatives I see here in Wake County have kind of accidentally just fallen into the position, not based on any qualifications or polish. And I don't want to pick on any of them by name, but there's a couple here in Wake County from
Mm.
the Democratic side who have some shortcomings.
Okay, so you bring up a great point, and it was something in my prepared list of topics I wanted to get in with you, and that is the difference in your strategy between national and local, particularly really local politics, and the strategies, tactics that are required to make an impact there. It is said uh, that in politics, or that politics is nothing more than show business for ugly people.
Hmm.
And I'm going to extrapolate that to my own industry and compare it to the politics of the Libertarian Party. And that is this, is that if I have a brand new band and we've been in the garage and we've been pounding out our songs and we've been writing for 6 months, 9 months, or a year, whatever it is, and we think that we've got 10 songs really, really ready to go, the first phone call that I'm going to make is not to Live Nation or Sony Records or to the PNC Arena, where because I'm not going to draw 20,000 people, so they're not going to, my band's not going to get booked in there. It's not
Hmm.
going to happen. The largest promotion company in the world is not going to even take my phone call, and Sony Records will not even look at my demo. They won't even look at it. Not even a possibility, because I'm not presenting it to them with some track record of success behind me. Why does the Libertarian Party, and now for 47, 48 years, continue to throw so much effort at national elections rather than doing what a band does and go first to that club that does an open mic on a Monday night, play 3 songs that night, hope somebody likes them, and they get invited to play again on Tuesday, and work their way up to a Friday night at a 100-seat club, and then 6 months later fill that club up, and then move to the 200-seat club?
Yeah,
Why do
I
you
don't really
continue to
know.
do?
Yeah, yeah, I understand the question. I don't really know, other than some things I'll share is libertarians, are not big fans of government. And so what you're talking about, going from the garage to filling a 70,000 seat arena, doesn't happen overnight. It's a long, hard slog. You'll have band members come and go. And that's where getting local libertarians to be involved in city events, planning commissions, county office, and then filtering out which ones could go on to that next level, that's a lot of work. And that's where I
Okay.
try to focus local, because you have to build that infrastructure if you're ever going to be there down the road. Unfortunately, libertarians just want that home run, right? They just
Right.
want to knock it out of the park, and hey, now we'll take care of it and it'll all be solved. We'll just go explain it to them. And every cycle, it's like, well, we didn't have the right person explain it the right way, and they just don't accept the fact that, number one, a lot of people don't want radical change, especially when things are going fairly well. We like to kid ourselves sometimes and say, hey, that everybody else will see how egregious and awful this is. But if a lot of people, if they have jobs, kids are healthy, things are going well, they made their mortgage, maybe radical change isn't what you sell. And so I think more important is we do need to maintain the ballot access. I think the focus for our candidates, to your point now, should be able to wear a suit correctly. They should be articulate and just explain libertarian solutions and options, and where voluntary action is the right action.
Now, let's go back a step here, and let's particularly talk about the party's continued national efforts at big seats. You know, for 48 years, 47 years, been running somebody every single cycle for president. Obviously, always running somebody for every single Senate seat, and you know where they in states where they are able to achieve access. Uh, why do they not put more emphasis on, you know, county seats, city councils, dog catcher, whatever, and make the impact there? Isn't doing something that has not worked for them in 48 years the the so-called definition
Well,
of insanity?
a lot of it is also the candidates. I mean, remember, we can't stop people. You know, if somebody's been registered libertarian for a couple of years and wants to make a difference and decides they have the money to file to run for U.S. Senate when
Right,
it's the first time they've run for office, and they haven't been looking at demographics, they haven't been working on a message, they just want to run because they care about X, then
right.
that's what you have. I mean, that's a lot of candidates, particularly ones that run for federal office, are as much interested in being the person who gets the message out that they want to get out. And so I think, you know, part of your question isn't entirely fair in the sense you're asking why a larger national libertarian organization doesn't reach down and better organize some of the states and some of the local affiliates. You know, it'd be
Yeah.
great if national provided financial assistance to Wake County, since we actually raised and spent some money in 2018, and we had a whole bunch of candidates. I think we had 13 of the 16 seats covered
Right.
in 2018. So it'd be great to get more help in those situations. Unfortunately, it's just not the way it works. And I don't have a problem with running candidates at the national level. The state ones, or the ones that run for federal office at the state level, like U.S. House, U.S.
Yeah.
Senate, they just, you know, it's a lot of it is just you can't pick the candidate or slow them down, and you
Does the
sometimes
does
go ahead.
the National Party not have? Well, it's because it sure seems to be that you know, whether it's the RNC or the DNC, they have a way of looking at a particular candidate that they don't like and go, yeah, these nine can be on say, but not you. And sometimes it's they've got, you know, rules set up that, you know, whether it's polling numbers or you know amount of fundraising that that allows entrance into those particular debates. But sometimes they just go, nope, not this time. Does the national party
We do
not
not
have
have.
that?
Not at the national that I'm aware of. I mean, our only defense locally in 2018, we faced a situation, and it was somewhat, there was some disagreement in the local affiliate how to handle it. We had somebody file to run, uh, who some of us were very uncomfortable with,
Hmm.
just around messaging, presentation. You know, to your point, you know, you're
Hmm.
worried about tattoos. I'm worried about the people sometimes that truly have the really can't get the message out well.
Right.
And so we had a primary. We recruited somebody else and had a primary. That's really the only mechanism I know about at the state level where we can kind of rally around. But I mean, it gets tough. And as far as national, I mean, we choose a convention.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's convention. That's not even
Right.
a primary. So it's, you know, who can get to the primary. I realize this is an odd year with the COVID-19, but
Right.
it's a
Right.
really challenge at the convention because you have some very hardcore people who show up to conventions. So
No, I get it. I get it. I understand that. Um, you you have I guess you've known that I'm only interested personally in joining forces with the Libertarian Party because I've talked to you briefly about this. I'm interested in the party only if there was a massive restructuring, and that is specifically that it became less of a party and more of a movement.
mhm.
And you know, somebody's going to go immediately turn hit the off button if I say Tea Party. I'm not saying the Tea Party. I'm saying something like the Tea Party. That's a
Mhm.
disruptive movement that was able to rally people around a single message at the time, a very, or at least a very, very small core, you know, set of ideals to make an impact. And they did. I mean, they had a huge impact. Now, we've been very disappointed in many of the winners that were associated with the Tea Party, but we still, in that wave for the liberty movement, we got Rand Paul. We got Thomas Massey. We got Justin Amash. We got
Hmm.
Mike Lee. We got some really great guys, really great constitutionalists, really great libertarian leaning guys with an R after their name. And I see myself, I see the possibility or the potential of a movement becoming less party focused, more message focused, and more, I don't want to say principles because that brings a whole other, you know, can of worms into the discussion, but that can become also a disruptive movement, something that can make deals with the major party candidates, something that when the major party candidates break their promises, okay, guess what that means? We now are going to run somebody against you next time. You're in these thin
Yeah.
margin states with 1, 2, 5%. We're going to hurt you because you broke your promise. Care to take it from there? The brain's running.
Well, I mean, so it's you have to have to do what you said to make a credible threat, which is basically what it is against a major party. That hey, if you don't at least support some of these liberty-oriented issues, if you don't share some of our values, we will run somebody against you and have an impact. That requires the race to be close, and it requires the Libertarian Party to be strategic, meaning it has, the right candidates who could accomplish that. I mean, look, we could do it. You know, governor's race is always close in North Carolina, at least historically, has generally been a pretty close race.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
A lot of the Senate races have been pretty close. As I indicated, there's some purple districts in Wake County, and so you have to first run some candidates, and you have to raise some money, and that's where the party I think has struggled in some cases. And then you also have to have leaders at the state level that can be strategic in which fights they pick, and then also, we have this very a lot of libertarians like, oh, we should be hands off, the candidates will do it and what have you, and so it makes it very hard sometimes, not just picking candidates or blocking candidates, so to speak, but also funding one candidate over another because they're in, to your point, a strategic race where we want to make sure that the loser and or winner understand that we made the difference, that
Yeah.
2%. And
I
so
have
it's just a
I have,
challenge.
yeah, I have always said, and and I don't have the empirical data here. It's pure instinct from doing what I do and keeping up with people. But I've always said that the small L guys far outnumber the party guys, the large L Libertarian Party members, and I believe that to be true. But I also know that there are extremely liberty oriented people on the edges of both of the major parties. We
Hmm.
do, in fact, have people that come to libertarianism from the left, just as we do have them come from the right, and that's where we find some of our friction. But nevertheless, they do come from both ways. It would seem to me that um, uh, and again, a Tea Party type movement would be able to rally those edges of the liberty oriented, libertarian leaning factions that are going to probably end up voting, R or D anyway, that they could be rallied around a cause, particularly in the primary season, by focusing on the more liberty oriented candidate when it presents itself from a major party, with the understanding that we're going to bring you our effort and I will bring you our support if you promise us A, B, C, and D. If you screw around and you violate one of those promises come the next cycle, we're taking this movement against you. And at
Okay.
the same
I
time,
guess
go ahead.
so the question I'll ask back is, which do you think is more important to accomplish? We'll just use national since it always comes up. Is it to be disruptive, meaning you got votes, because that's what really is disruptive, or is it important to carry? I won't use the word pure, but at least a consistent libertarian message. Which one of
Well,
those would you prioritize?
well, first of all, that's why I think principle is more important than party. And it was my very first experience with a Libertarian Party state chair here in North Carolina 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, was the first time that I went to a meeting and I sat down, and I had just got back from a financial conference in Aruba, and the keynote speaker was Ron Paul, and he just blew me away. He crystallized, all of
Mhm.
the things that I had been struggling with for years of wondering why I was not a man without a country, but a man without a party. What is going on here? And he brought it all into focus in a 1 hour, speech that he made. And I was so excited by that. I started chasing other intellectual rabbits and learning a little bit more. And I found out that there was a Libertarian Party meeting here in Wake County, and I went. The state chair was there that night. I saw what I saw. I won't get into all that, and listen to what I listened to, and I'm not going to get into all that. But then at the very end of it, I waited in line so that I could talk to the state chair, and I asked her. I just said, I'm ignorant to party machinations. I still am, but I'm ignorant. And I said, so what do you think of Ron Paul? And she goes, oh my God. She goes, Ron is my hero. And I said, then why don't you guys do what he did and put an R after your name so you can actually get elected? Because none of you guys ever have. Oh, we can't do that. We can't do that. And she said, and I quote verbatim, she said, it's more important that we build the party than it is, you know, to follow that ideal. I think she's wrong. I think a movement can get behind and select the best candidate, regardless of what letters behind their name, hold their feet to the fire with a substantial, a larger number of people than just the party members, but all those fringes on the outside who want to force those candidates into libertarian ideals.
So I'm a little softer than some of the other libertarians in the sense that I think the individual, whatever way they think they can get the message out and forward, they should proceed with. And I mean, even when people aren't libertarian, we've had, Wake has become big enough as far as the Libertarian Party, Wake LP. We've had Joe John come by because we agree on redistricting. We've had Dale Falwell, state treasurer, come by and talk about his clear pricing plan. So I always try to look, whether it's R or D, for those opportunities locally where there's some agreement, because it's often easier once you can find at least one thing you agree on to build a relationship and at least get a conversation going when you disagree. Now, as far as running somebody as an RD, if we've had it, we've had people decide to become unaffiliated for local races. Elsewhere in the state, we've had people try to switch and become R. What we sometimes find is those candidates weren't very effective,
Mm-hmm.
meaning it wasn't a question of whether they were L or R. They were just not a very good,
Right.
they weren't good communicators. They weren't good at raising money. And the other parties, they also will, kind of filter people out. But I'm not as opposed to somebody who is registered libertarian switching to R&D if they think that'll have a bigger impact. Um, my concern is sometimes when people say that, they're talking about themselves, not, to your point, the movement. So if you're
Yeah.
talking about getting an idea across or a movement and that's how you think you can best do it, I'm not as opposed, although I don't think you'll be able to get through. But the issue is, in a lot of cases, it's just the candidate it wants to be in office, which is, again, I go back to the candidates who first time decide that they're going to run for U.S. Senate or first time run for U.S. House. That's great if they want to get the libertarian message out, but if they file and tell me they think they're going to be elected, I have a hard time knowing the other parties are working with tens of millions of dollars, if you count the PACs, that they're
Right.
going to get elected with 10,000, 20,000, 30,000.
I and I don't want to beat this horse to death, but it truly is a passion of mine because, as I said, I consider the party my natural uh, genetic family
No, it's
uh, at the Liberty core, but you know you and I both on our Facebook friend list, we could go click on friends of friends of friends all day, and I know this because I have done this. You will literally see hundreds, if not thousands, of Libertarian Party members who have the what does Facebook call that on your profile picture? You can get like a frame around it that
Hmm.
is that what they call it, a frame? I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah. So whatever it's called, and their frame identifies them as a Libertarian Party member, proudly so. Inside that frame is a picture of them with Ron Paul, Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, Justin Amash, all of which have had R's after their name the vast majority of their career. And I'm always amazed at that juxtaposition there, because it seems to me, again, and I don't want to, but I won't use a music analogy this time, but I'll use a sports analogy. If if you want to play in the game, unfortunately, the game is set. The rules are set by the owners, and this is your, these are the rules of admission to the game and playing the game. And a lot of people have tried to play the game of the NFL and have not been successful. The AFL figured out how to do it. They ended up merging with the NFL back in late '60s, early '70s. And then then there was the WFL. They lasted for a couple of years and they went away. Then the USFL happened and they got blown out. Now we got the XFL. So there seems like there could be more of a focus on finding a way into the big game than what the LP has identified, or a better strategy. That's
I
coming
think
from
you
me.
can do both. I think you can. I think you can do both. I think in some cases, especially a gerrymandered district where maybe the Democrat, isn't going to run, or the Republican isn't going to run, it makes a lot of sense to file
Yeah,
a Libertarian. And
right.
it also in a race where maybe we couldn't get, look, it'd be great to be able to do both, right? To have a
Yeah,
bench so deep that you could run a Libertarian as a Libertarian, but also have somebody who maybe a year before switched. And in Wake County, this is where that R thing doesn't work so well. They'd have to be a Democrat,
yeah.
right? If we
Right,
were going
right,
to,
right.
if a local Libertarian were to quote infiltrate a party or have an influence in a local party, they'd have to run as a Democrat and they'd have to win a primary, because that's where the battle, in many of these districts, the decision is made at the Democratic, when the Democratic Party has their primary, that's it.
Yeah,
That's who becomes the NCGA winner.
right,
Um, that's how Dwayne Hall lost House 11. He got caught up in the Me Too movement locally, and
right,
apparently had some problems with his behavior, and he lost a primary. Well,
right.
once he lost that primary, that was it. House 11, there you go. So I think you could do both if the bench was that deep and the money was there. I'd love to see, look, if you're talking about a movement, I would love to see libertarian leaning Republicans and libertarian leaning Democrats run for office, and then also have, a committed libertarian run as a libertarian, and just have, the libertarian message get out in all three, in our party primarily, but also in the other parties. I just think that we would need to recruit differently in Wake County, and I don't think we have the depth and money. But I'd love to see, and it does happen.
Well,
There are some Democrats who are sympathetic to us in the county,
speaking
at
of,
least at the
yeah,
county level.
sure. Speaking of recruitment, did you know that one of your guys called me last week or week before
Yes,
and invited me
yes,
to get
yes.
on the
No,
ticket here in
I'm well aware.
my district? You're aware of
You have a lot of followers. I know you could raise some money, and you would get a message out, and you would clean up nice, and yeah, it'd be. I think you'd be a great candidate at some point. So
I'll tell you
that's
what. I'll tell you what.
you should consider it.
Let's go talk to let's go to the national committee, and let's reorganize, and I'll join the team.
That's again, that's one of the reasons I enjoy working at the local level, is I can actually have some influence on how things work, at least within the party. And I can build relationships with these people, and you can be effective to a limit. If you start looking at national, that's why I'm not really terribly interested in leadership positions at the state level, and certainly not at the national level, because I just want
Right.
to remain focused. I want to build relationships with people I know and focus on issues that are local where we can have an impact. I mean, it's nice. There's
Right.
nobody on Raleigh, unlike other libertarians who focus on these presidentially, there's nobody on Raleigh City Council who doesn't know who I am,
Mm,
by face, because I
right.
speak at council, I show
Right.
up at their events. To your point, I mean, it's Raleigh City Council's unaffiliated, but I think I've donated to all but two of the current eight.
Mm.
and I don't agree with them on everything. But to your point, again, it's a little bit, it's pay to play.
Well, it is.
So you donate, you volunteer for some of them, you participate, and then when you disagree with them strongly, they know you're not just some person that crawled out of the woodwork to, you know, scream liberty and then just crawl back to, mom's basement. They want to know that you're somebody engaged that attends all these meetings. And that's the hard part that people need to get. If they really want to build the liberty movement, you need to sit through a 2-hour meeting on bus rapid transit and really understand what the city and county are trying to do and have conversations with real people where you're not just, well, we just shouldn't have buses at all. Government shouldn't buy buses. This whole place shouldn't exist. This
Right.
shouldn't exist.
Right. No,
You
that's
gotta you
exactly
gotta
right.
go listen to people and gain a perspective.
Yeah, no, and that goes back to the world in which we live versus the world we want. It's we live in a world that's going to have buses now. How can we best serve the community at the lowest cost and with the least damage to liberty in that process?
Yeah.
For me, it's bike lanes. Don't take my freedom of egress by installing miles and miles of bike lanes that cause me to sit in traffic even longer and burn more fuel and pollute the air even to a greater
No,
extent.
but I mean, so it's interesting. Like even before this happened, the city of Raleigh is going to very likely have an affordable housing bond on the ballot here. Um, I'm not entirely comfortable with that as the best solution, but in my opinion, if they had paired that with significant deregulation around zoning, that might have been an effective compromise. Now they
Yeah.
were also talking about $100 million for Dick's Park, which and that was going to be the one.
Right.
That was going to be, if that happened, that was going to be a local issue where we
Yeah.
just had to dig in, because I'm just not comfortable spending $100 million, borrowing $100 million for a park.
Yeah. From a city
That
that's
park,
that's already over $2 billion in debt.
and they're already agreed to build a new city hall that will not be cheap either, and they wanted to borrow even more money for other parks besides Dick's. So, but again, that goes to what can you affect if you're so tied up in national that you can't take the time to then go stop a bond locally in your own city where, look, we have the manpower to put out 1,000 signs. We have the manpower to knock on at least a few thousand doors. We have an email list. We can have an impact on these local issues. And it's just trying to sometimes get the attention. And we've been making progress locally, getting people to attend city events and participate in campaigns. And some libertarians are starting to at least appreciate that they're listened to, but also that their work has an impact,
Yeah.
as opposed to the national stuff where it's really tough.
Silver lining.
Unless we get
Silver
another.
lining. Silver lining just came to mind with this hit that the city has taken in sales tax revenues because of this crisis. Maybe some of these issues will be backburnered a little further away, and we've got time
Oh,
to
those.
work on them.
Yeah, I think those bonds are already off the table.
Good.
I think the bonds, at least for the parks, and the 200 millions, that's. I don't think they'll put that on the ballot. I just can't see how they did that.
Let's jump to something we've kind of pecked at a little bit off and on here. I don't know, honestly, David. There's one of the things that endears the greatest level of respect that I have for you and how you handle your affiliate program in the LP movement is how you herd the cats between the various factions, just as you said, the anarchists to the pragmatists to God knows. I mean, I call them for what I believe they are. I mean, they're. I think there isn't there actually a socialist libertarian caucus that meets at the national meetings. I've seen it.
That that's quite possible.
Well, you have
Again,
some in your midst, but nevertheless, how do you herd
yes,
these cats? How do you bring them together and get them to do anything? Because in my mind, some of these guys they're natural enemies. they're not they're not like they're not either all descended from the apes or all mammals. Some of them are reptilian versus.
now see that's not elevating the conversation there. But
No, it's not, but it's a reality. I don't know how you do it.
so as the organization finally got beyond a smaller number of members, I think one of the things I try to do is ask people, hey, what are you comfortable doing? And then I have to balance how good they are at it. So if somebody does social media professionally, let that person do social media. And in some cases, there's a lot of conversations that happen on Slack, like, hey, we need to balance this. Some things we just, if I can't get agreement, we just choose um, to not really engage as strongly on those issues if we can't get agreement. But in other cases, look, we have conversations, meetings. Hey, what can we accomplish with our NCGA candidates here in Wake County? What are issues that poll well and focus on the demographic we want to focus on, where we can kind of come together and approach it as a team? And I think when people, as everybody feels they're contributing in a meaningful way, and something is there that they're passionate about, like one of the three issues is something they care about, or they're able to do something that they think they're good at, and they see their work. That's been the other problem in the past for the parties. You'll ask people, hey, I want to come, I want to help, and they'll do X. Let's say X is a lot of graphics design work, and the person is like just stellar at it. They do
Yeah.
it professionally. Their work is always top notch, but then it never gets out because we don't raise any money at all. And people don't put up websites, and so the graphics doesn't get used. Well, that frustrates that volunteer, and then you lose that volunteer.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to guard against, is putting people to work and making sure if you ask a volunteer, hey, would you do X, that you then use what they produced, right? And that's always moderating the big dream versus what you can really accomplish. So, and I will
Well,
say, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, there's always, anytime you get a group of people together, there's always going to be an oddball. There's always going to be an antagonist. There's always going to be a couple of people that just don't fit in with the larger group or any particular smaller clique. That's just a human element. But where do you have any particular problems where you deal with those deep rooted philosophical issues that just really drive a wedge in your ability to get anything done? And if so, how do you navigate around it?
So there are sometimes some one-on-one conversations where it's kind of like, hey, I need you to not. We're not going to push this issue. So the fact that you disagree with Bob or Ted on this issue isn't really you know, isn't really a reason for us to not succeed as a team around these other issues.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to pick your battles. I don't have too many people right now that are just adamant that, hey, if I don't get my way, I'm not going to participate in the team. And I think some of that is success, right? I mean, in the sense that for us, it's success to have 2 election cycles with more than 10 candidates running for NCGA.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that, I think our annual budget in 2014 or 2015 was like $500. We easily pull in more than that per month. I mean, per month. So I mean, the budget. I mean, I think if you add up the candidates, we spent almost 40,000 in 2018 or more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was not possible 4 years ago. So now people sometimes have a reason to cooperate, because if you cooperate, you get something, right? The message
Right.
gets out. I mean, in 2018, just to have yard signs, out and about, where like people were seeing them, people on Facebook, hey, I saw a libertarian yard sign, and it wasn't like, and then they saw another, and then another,
Right.
and
Right.
that people then know you're there. And
Yeah.
so you have to have some success, and you have to put volunteers to work. People will put aside grudges and certain objectives if they think the overall team is heading in the right direction. And I think we've been doing that.
I've always believed that on even some of the more divisive ideological, battlegrounds, that if we can just agree on that one, there's some element of that divide that we do agree on, and because in reality, in the world in which we exist, it's going to take 20 to 50 years for us to win that, back anyway. Can we just set that battle off for 50 years? Let our
Yeah.
kids fight over that one.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
could I could list off a dozen examples right now, but um, but again, this part of my admiration is how you manage through all of that, because I don't
Yeah.
manage through some of those things very well. Particularly with party members. I'm be honest. I've had literally one of your guys who I really really like, and we have great conversations. We've been to a lot of meetings, of other types of liberty oriented meetings. You know,
Hmm.
we spent a lot of time together, and he said, "Oh no," he goes, "No, I know that one day that you're going to kill me." And I went, what? He goes, oh yeah, because you're a small government guy and I'm a no government guy. That means at some point in our, our future, if you win, you're going to take me down. And I'm like, wow. Okay. but at least,
I mean,
but
look,
at least he's looking to the future. We can work together until then.
and again, you can't always be all business, and that's why I encourage. There are other meetups out there. It is, I think, it's an important exercise to sometimes go through where that boundary would be, like just because people have political discussions and they get challenged on their beliefs and philosophies. Like how small could government get before this, all broke down and became Lord of the Flies. Um, I will go back to the other point. We do a decent job at Wake LP. People run ideas past others. So I will point out one of our tattooed candidates that you mentioned. He signed off on a lawsuit. He joined a lawsuit against
Yeah.
Sheriff Baker,
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Great.
Baker had to backtrack and retreat. And so even though that candidate is, probably has a more challenging shot of winning an NC Senate race, he's already gotten something done,
Yeah, he
and
did.
that's political activism, and that's a constitutional right that I take seriously. And so the fact that he was able to get into court and get the sheriff to kind of back down and change how they were going to process concealed carry permits, that's good news for Wake County.
No, and again to my earlier point, I love his tattoos. I don't care because he's going to see
You're in the
that.
music industry. You've seen them before. You've
Yes,
seen
I
them
have.
before.
I've seen it all, both on stage and in the dressing rooms. But the but finally, let's go ahead and close this out with um, kind of your vision for the future here. And I'm not talking about you're focused locally, and that's what I want to talk about. Where are you taking this thing here in the remainder of this election cycle that we're in? This is a big one, obviously, and it's been made even uh, more important probably because of this pandemic crisis. So where are we headed now? And then phase two or step two of this question would be, what's after that?
So for 2020, the top of the ticket. Look, when people show up to vote for president, you have a lot of people that are only vote in presidential cycles. They're going to show up. They know who they're going to vote for. Governor, probably the same.
Yeah.
Down ballot is where it starts to open up, and that's where I'm happy with our NCGA candidates. I think in a very polarized, partisan election cycle, and one that's going to have a lot of other interesting background issues with everything we've had with this virus, to have a group of candidates who aren't just libertarian, but are also, to be honest, I think we're going to present the sane, moderate option to the way a lot of people, especially the under 40 crowd, perceive the other two parties. And so to be talking about school choice is important, talking about privatizing ABC, which is wildly popular. Like it's one of those things where most people don't understand why it hasn't happened
Right.
because it polls at like 85%. And then we're going to talk a little bit about zoning, letting people exercise their basic property rights to broaden the types of residential housing that are needed. And I think with the number of people that are struggling with affordable housing, that'll be a market solution, a libertarian solution for that challenge. Is one that we will do well presenting. And so I'm hopeful that that continues to build the party and the perception locally that, hey, we're people who are just presenting very reasonable options and solutions to reduce the scope of government and make society a better place.
Hmm, good.
So
Anything else you want to tell us about your your local team?
yes, I think people like yourself should consider donating to the local team if you want to get that message out. So we definitely do need the money. We do try to spend it responsibly. And then the other thing in the background that happens is we continue to work to build out the infrastructure. It's really hard when candidates and other parties that are recruited. There are people that are already there to help. They have done it before, that have experience. It's really tough. A lot of libertarians, I think, sometimes are reluctant to run for local races because they just don't. Just the filings, the stuff that a treasurer would have to do, finding a treasurer, uh, websites, social media. So as we continue to build that team in Wake LP, it makes it easier for us to recruit. So I'm continuing to do what many perceive as the boring part of the job is building out that infrastructure. But it's absolutely critical for Wake LP to continue to grow.
Very cool. Well, man, I really appreciate you taking your time here on a uh, what do we? This is a stay-at-home order Sunday, lockdown Sunday here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm sure we're just a few miles away from each other, maybe even closer because I don't know where you live. But we're
In North
social
Illinois.
distancing right now,
Yeah.
and and as I said a couple times already, my sincere respect to you. If it had not been for the way that you handle uh, your local group and your meetings, I would not have been inclined to come back and poke my head in the door on occasion as I have over the last couple of years. So,
We
good job.
Yeah. Well, hopefully our May 13th Tobacco Road meetup can still happen. We're going to talk about privatizing ABC, and you'll be happy to know that Michael Munger,
Mm.
who does clean up well in a suit and really is
Yeah,
sharp, one of his key issues, and he's actually working on a paper around privatizing the ABC system. So there's some real intellectual firepower behind some of our candidates, and
that's awesome.
so I think you will appreciate the opportunity to vote for him this year.
Awesome. Thank you, man. All right.
All
Once
right.
again, David Ulmer, chair for the Wake County, North Carolina, a Libertarian Party. Thank you again for spending this time with me today. And I'll see you, if not May 13th, soon, somewhere.
All right. Thank you. Take care.